Okay, we have made it to the last episode in the syntax video series, and we're talking about clausal elements. Now, we're just going to quickly recap. We talked about clauses, how you've got an independent clause is a clause that can stand on its own as a whole sentence, or you've got dependent clauses, which are ones that can't, and they need to have a main clause to give it some kind of context. So if you've got a sentence which is just one independent clause, you call that a simple sentence. If you've got at least two independent clauses joined together, you call it a compound sentence. If you've got both an independent and a dependent clause stuck together as a sentence, you call that a complex sentence. These definitions will be useful later on. Now, those are sentence structures. There's also something in VCE England we call sentence types, and basically there's four of them to look out for. A declarative sentence is basically a statement like, this is a house, and a declarative sentence will have a full stop at the end of it. You might have an interrogative sentence, which is a question, and it'll have a question mark at the end, like, is this a house? Maybe you will have an exclamatory sentence, like an exclamation, this is excellent, and they'll have an exclamation mark at the end. The fourth one also may have an exclamation at the end, and it's an imperative sentence, which means you're giving a command. Buy this house. Imperative sentences are kind of interesting because they break the rule on needing to have a subject, because oftentimes you just don't need it there. In fact, pretty much always in English you don't need it there. It's implied that it's you, like I want you to buy this house, but you just say buy this house. Okay, so we're going to talk a bit about what goes into a clause, and some of this you already know. We're only adding on a couple of new words. So the clausal elements, there's an acronym SVOCA, so SVOCA, which is basically S is for subject. You guys already know what that is. The subject does the verb, and the V is the verb, the finite verb here, or whatever other verb structures you've got happening. You might have an object, or you might have a complement, and you might have an adverbial. So what do all these mean? First of all, subject and object. This distinction is kind of important. This is kind of all about, languages all have to do this some way or another. The subject does the verb to the direct object. So the subject verbs the object is a good definition to have in your head. The old grey horse eats the limp vegetables. The old grey horse is the subject. We've got a whole noun phrase, the old grey horse, which is the subject of this sentence. We've got the verb eats, and we've got the direct object, the limp vegetables. That's what is being eaten. Something you'll notice is that the subject and the object in any given sentence kind of has to be a noun, or at least a noun phrase, maybe a pronoun. But at any rate, because it's a thing that's doing something, or it's a thing that's having something done to it, it has to be a thing. It has to be a person or a place or a thing. It's kind of got to be a noun. So let's talk again. We've got subject and then direct object. Max sees the old man. Max is the subject because he's doing the verb, and the seeing, the verb, is being done to the old man. So the old man's the direct object. Stan and Louise, subject, drink, verb, a lot of water, direct object. You, subject, will need, verb, a new car, the direct object. Alrighty, now, so the subject does the verb to the direct object. Great. The subject does the verb to the direct object for the benefit of the indirect object. Okay, here's an example. Max gives his mum a birthday present. So the direct object, you have to ask the question, what is being given? What is actually getting verbed? And here, it's the birthday present that is getting given to the mum. Max isn't doing anything to the mum. She's not the direct object. She's not getting verbed. The present's getting verbed to the mum. More examples. All right, subject, direct object, indirect object. We wish you all Merry Christmas. So you guys are the indirect object who are receiving my wishes of a Merry Christmas. So the Merry Christmas is what I am wishing you. That's what's getting verbed. So that's the direct object. And we is the subject. All right, Jasmine buys her brother a new shirt. Jasmine is the subject. She is buying the shirt for her brother. She's not buying her brother. She's buying the shirt. So the shirt's the direct object that is actually getting bought, and it's for her brother. So the one who's receiving the action or the direct object of your action is the indirect object. Or one like this. Jez showed me the map. See if you can do these ones. If you want to pause the video and see if you can work out what is the subject, direct object, and indirect object in each of these. When you're ready to unpause it, using the color code from the last slide, that's what we should have worked out there. The second last one doesn't have an indirect object. Sometimes you've got to think a little about these things. Okay. Right. So we've got subject, verb, object. We know that there's direct and indirect objects. Complement and adverbial. What do they mean? Well, let's just point out something here. There's a difference between a complement and a complement. Complement with an I is like you're saying nice to someone, whereas complement with an E means something that creates a full set of something, basically. So, a compliment, I love your new shoes, as opposed to a compliment, these shoes really complete my outfit. And that's actually a good thing to remember. Compliment, it's connected to complete. So complements complete things. If you remember that. In a lot of textbooks, complements can get really tricky. It can become this really tangled up sort of topic. I'm going to try and keep it really simple here and just tell you what you really need, basic definition that will do the job for what you need right now. They're going to tell you more about a subject or object, at least for our purposes, and they're often found after the verb to be. Something like, we are very tired. Very tired is a subject complement. It's telling us about the subject we. We are very tired. It's completing that clause there. You often have it after certain stative verbs, like things like feel. I feel hungry. Because you're not doing anything to anything. There's no direct object there. The hungry is kind of a complement of how you're feeling. And becoming. So he's becoming a man. You're not doing anything to a man. It's not a direct object. It's a complement of, what you are becoming, for lack of a better description. It's basically completing that phrase. Again, this is a complicated thing. If you Google complement in linguistics, you're going to find a lot of weirder, complicated sort of definitions for it, and the definitions vary. They're not always consistent in how it's used in different books. For our purposes, just use it like this. That'll get you across the line for the sake of VCE. If you were doing linguistics at uni, you might go well down a whole nother rabbit hole with that. Anyway, and adverbials, we've talked about adverbials a bunch. You know what they are. Anything that tells you where or how or when the action is happening, telling us about the verb. So it's kind of like an adverb. Those are adverbials, and we've used that a lot. This word you're going to use a lot in Year 12 as well, looking for the adverbials that give some interesting detail to your sentences. Galena works in a secondhand bookshop. In a secondhand bookshop, that whole prepositional phrase is an adverbial. We talked about that back in the phrases one. So if it's a phrase or a clause, well, here we're talking about inside of a clause. So something that's telling you about the action, how, when, or where, it's going to be an adverbial. Now, one last thing with this. We're talking about the subjects and the verbs and the objects, and English normally tells you what's the subject, what's the verb, what's the object, using word order. We say, the man bites the dog. And in that sense, you know that the man's doing it, the verb is bites, and the object is the dog. Even though it's weird for a man to bite a dog, you know that's what I meant, because that was the word order I used. Other languages might do this differently, but English, it will go subject, verb, object. Now, Steve-O's building a new house. The subject is Steve-O, he's doing it. Is building is your verb, or like it's you got your is finite verb, and then building present participle to make he is doing it right now, present progressive. The direct object is the new house. Now, something else you can do though, rather than talking about the subject and the object, we can talk about an agent and a patient. So the agent is doing the verb to the patient. Why would you need to do this? Basically so that you can do the next thing without contradicting yourself. If you need to focus on the direct object, so we've already got this sentence, this normal default sentence, Steve-O's building a new house. This default structure is called active voice. You are talking about the person who is actively doing the verb to the other thing. But if you need to, you can change it so you're focusing on the direct object. So the patient, in other words, you're going to promote this patient up to being the new subject. Now, the subject is now the new house, and it's being built by Steve-O. You have flipped it. So the meaning is the same thing is happening in the real world, but you're focusing now on the new house. And this is called passive voice. So passive voice is when you you take the patient and make it the new subject of the sentence. So you've basically taken what was the direct object and turned it into a new subject and focusing on that. And you've reversed it. So you're saying the thing is getting verbed by someone. So active sentence, someone is verbing an object. Passive sentence, the object is getting verbed by someone. Why? Why do we need this? Why is this useful? I'll show you why it's useful. Here's an active sentence. The minister has made a mistake. Active sentence, subject, verb, object. What if you wanted to focus on the mistake? A mistake has been made by the minister. So there you go. Active voice top, passive voice second. Something else you can do, and this is where it gets very useful and where you see it's used a lot. You can leave out who did it. So if you just want to focus on what got verbed and you don't want to say who did it, a mistake has been made. You're avoiding saying whose fault it was. This is called agentless passive. Okay, that's all for today. Congratulations, you've gotten all the way through syntax.